Once upon a time, there was a dog named Jim. Now, this Jim dog was a dog of superior intelligence when compared to other dogs. For you see, he didn't play fetch, he manipulated his owner into fetching for him. And he wasn't a very nice dog. I mean, clearly, I already gave you one example of how, so he did have one friend. And that was a cheerful, optimistic, all-around good guy bear named Rasputin. Now, Rasputin the bear was a kindly bear, and he was always stopping to help people. Now, Rasputin the bear and Jim the dog, they lived in a small suburban area of New York that you can't find unless you know where to go, with fire hydrants on every street corner and salmon streams in every garden. So, they lived a good life together, hanging out and getting into adventures and misadventures. But one day, Jim came to Rasputin and said, "Rasputin, my bones are missing. Where could they have gone?" Now, Rasputin wasn't the smartest bear in the bunch. As we all know, bears travel in bunches. Murder of crows, a bunch of bears. Anyways, Rasputin thought long and hard, and he said, "Well, I guess we'll have to analyze the crime scene. Where are these bones?" Jim had just explained that the bones were missing, but he was calm with Rasputin, as he had to be, and he led him to the garden where his bone collection used to be. "Hey, Rasputin, this is where my bones should be, but they're not here," Jim said. Now Rasputin thought long and hard, as he already had and will continue to do so. He's a simple, mild-mannered bear, as I stated before. You can't expect too much from them. So, he thought long and hard, and even longer and even harder, until his head was full to bursting with thought. And then he finally spoke. "Well, Jim, I think maybe we ought to stake out the place." And now Jim heard the word steak, and his mind just went complete blank. He was like, "Steak where?" But, he calmed down once again. Dogs. And they decided to stake out the place. So, they set up a tent, and they huddled together for warmth, and they sat through the night and watched the bone area. It was around 1 in the morning, or the witching hour, or the dogging hour, as Jim likes to call it. But that's beside the point. So, it was the witching dogging hour, and they had almost drifted off to sleep. They had been telling scary ghost stories to pass the time, you see, when all of a sudden, out of the corner of Rasputin's eye, his peripheral vision, if you will, or his beariferal vision, as Jim would say once again. Oh, that Jim. But anyways, he saw out of the corner of his eye long spikes, and he was like, "Oh, what are those long spikes doing where those bones should be?" And he looked, and it was a porcupine. Not just any porcupine, though. It was Petey the porcupine, and he was out for revenge. Ever since Jim, 2 years ago, to this day actually, had stolen that porcupine's friendship bracelet, which is inevitably why that porcupine was led to believe that his wife had left him, because that friendship bracelet was all they had together at that point, and they were going through a rough patch, and that was just the last straw. His wife was all like, "Porcupine, I can't believe you lost that friendship bracelet. Get out of here." And next thing you know, the divorce papers were signed, and that was that. So, Rasputin pounced. But, it's a porcupine, so he gave away the element of surprise, first of all, and second of all, he got a face full of porcupine quills. Jim was the smarter sort, as I said before, and he was like, "No, Rasputin, what are you doing?" But Rasputin was just howling in pain at this point, or, well, I guess, what would a bear do? He wouldn't howl, he would growl, perhaps? Yes, or bare his teeth, eh? Bare his teeth. Yep, so he bared his teeth and growled quite ferociously, And Petey the Porcupine ran off because he did not want to be around that when they got their stuff together. After about an hour of pain and growling and baring teeth, they came up with a plan to get Petey the Porcupine. Now, rumor had it that Petey the Porcupine had been living in an old refrigerator down at the local dump. And it standed to good reason that he was probably keeping all those bones in that fridge too. So, later in the evening still, they decided to go to the dump to get the element of surprise because they're like, he'll never be able to leave in this amount of time. They got there in Rasputin's car. That's right, he can drive. And Jim had his head out the window the entire way, just panting and laughing and gleefully enjoying the ride. So Rasputin parked the car outside the dump, not too close because he didn't want Petey the Porcupine to hear them come up. And they shambled on up to the refrigerator, which was closed and most clearly locked. So they basically just opened it, and there was Petey the Porcupine, filled to the brim with bones. There were bones leaking out of his porcupine collared shirts. And he had his glasses on. He was about to head for Mexico, clearly. Now, Petey the Porcupine was obviously caught red-handed, or bone-handed, as Jim might say. Well, anyways. So, he fell on the mercy of Jim and Rasputin, and he was all like, "Guys, don't do this to me, please, I'm sorry. It's just I blame you for my breakup marriage, and I don't know what to do, I'm at the end of my rope." Now, Jim, being the smart sort, said, "Alright, I'll let you go this time, but you gotta do a task for me." Petey the Porcupine was a little suspicious of this, because porcupines are usually used in the animal mafia, as we all know. So, he didn't want to get into that, but once again, his life was going down the drain. What did he have to lose at this point? He was like, "Okay, what is it?" So, Jim thought long and hard, and he inevitably had him open a museum for dogs, because Petey the Porcupine had that power from the divorce. He got alimony checks every week. Most people get them once a month. He got them every week. His wife had been loaded by the time they split up. So, Jim got a dog museum dedicated to dogs and their bones. And he got his bones back naturally. And Petey the Porcupine got to live. And Rasputin also got a jar of honey out of the deal, which he had just found at the dump, but it was full. And he didn't know where it came from, but he's not going to question a gift honey in the mouth, or some sweet honey in the rock, if you want to go that way. Anyways, so they all lived together for quite some time, and some might say it was happily ever after, until, of course, the great calamity happened, which I will get into next week, most certainly. So that was the tale of Jim Rasputin and Petey the Porcupine, who later became the best of friends, but once again, we'll get into that next week.